My name is Emma Collins, 38 years old, a wildlife photographer. With over 15 years of traveling across the globe, I've grown accustomed to the challenges of nature, but I never imagined I'd find myself in such a dangerous situation. That day, I was deep in the Alaskan wilderness, where only biting cold and absolute silence kept me company. My old truck, my loyal companion on every journey, suddenly stalled on a muddy trail strewn with leaves. I shook my head and clicked my tongue. "Not now!" I muttered to myself, trying to restart the engine, but it sputtered a few times before falling completely silent. The dashboard lights dimmed, signaling the truck was nearly out of power. I opened the door and stepped out, the icy chill immediately wrapping around me. My breath formed clouds of white mist in the fading evening light. Lifting the hood, I stared at the engine, but truthfully, I wasn't much of a mechanic. All I saw were wires and machinery I couldn't make sense of. "Great job, Emma! Just great!" I said sarcastically to myself. Returning to the truck, I reached for the satellite phone on the passenger seat, but when I turned it on, the screen stayed black. I sighed, gripping the phone tightly as if willing it to work. Damn it! How could I forget to charge this? A wave of helplessness washed over me. All I had was a broken truck and a useless phone. I grabbed my camera and opened the lens, scrolling through the photos I'd taken earlier. As I flipped through, a chill ran down my spine. Bears. I had captured a series of photos of them throughout the afternoon. At first, I thought they were simply hunting ahead of the winter, but looking closely, I noticed something unusual. The bears weren't moving individually. They were gathering in groups. More than that, their movements seemed coordinated, almost purposeful. An uneasy feeling crept into me. As I pondered, a strange sound echoed from the distance, the snap of a branch. I raised my head, looking through the frost-covered windshield. "Who's there?" I murmured, though I knew no one would answer in the middle of this wilderness. The dim light of the lingering sunset illuminated the trail, but beyond the towering shadows of the trees, there was nothing else to be seen. I decided to step outside to check my surroundings. Grabbing the small flashlight from the truck, I shone it on the ground. Large footprints appeared clearly in the damp mud, much bigger than any I had seen before. A shiver ran through me. Could it be bears? Are they really this close? I muttered, trying to steady myself. A cold gust of wind blew past, raising goosebumps on my skin. I turned back toward the truck, but just as I opened the door, a faint growl echoed from the distance. Though soft, it was enough to make my heart nearly stop. I collapsed onto the driver's seat, my hands trembling as I shut and locked the door. By now, darkness had enveloped the forest entirely, and I felt as though I were being swallowed by fear. I reached for the dashboard, trying the ignition again. Nothing happened except the cold, mechanical click of the engine. I turned on the radio, hoping to catch any signal, but all I heard was the static hiss of dead air. "Don't panic, Emma. Stay calm," I whispered to myself, though my palms were already slick with sweat. As the dim glow of the truck's headlights began to fade, I picked up my camera and aimed it out the window. Through the lens, I caught sight of a large figure moving between the trees. I couldn't make out what it was, but I could feel its presence. "A bear. It has to be a bear," I murmured. Taking a deep breath, I fought to keep myself from spiraling into panic. Moments later, from the shadows of the forest, the shapes began to emerge. 1, 2, then 3 bears appeared, standing about 30 meters from the truck. They didn't approach immediately, just stood there as if watching me. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel their eyes on me, like a predator locking onto its prey. "Don't do anything stupid, Emma," I whispered under my breath, praying the bears would leave. But instead, more shapes began to materialize from the darkness. I didn't even dare breathe deeply as I stared into the inky black, where more and more bears slowly stepped out and formed a circle around the truck. At that moment, I realized I wasn't just stranded in the wilderness. I was at the center of something far beyond anything I had ever encountered before. I sat frozen in the truck, my eyes locked on the darkness outside. Through the frost-covered windows, I could make out the faint shapes of massive bears moving in the shadows. One of them came closer, passing through the dim beam of my fading headlights. The light reflected off its thick fur, accentuating its raw, untamed power. No, 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 don't come any closer, I whispered, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my hands ached. The heavy breathing of the bears grew louder in the stillness, each step seeming to make the entire forest tremble. I tried to reassure myself. They're just curious. They won't do anything if I don't provoke them. I decided to try turning on the high beams. Maybe the light will scare them off, I muttered, my fingers trembling as I fumbled for the controls. When the high beams flickered to life, they barely illuminated a few of the bears in front of me. They didn't run. Instead, they stood still, as if deliberating. One bear, significantly larger than the rest, raised its head and looked directly at my truck. Through the fogged glass, its gaze seemed to pierce right through me, sending a chill down my spine. Suddenly, the headlights flickered and went out entirely. No way! I gasped, my breath quickening as I frantically pressed the button, but nothing happened. In the darkness, I could sense the bears tightening their circle. A feeling of entrapment and helplessness washed over me, paralyzing me with fear. Grabbing my camera, I used the zoom lens to get a closer look outside. What I saw made my stomach drop. The bears weren't moving randomly. They were keeping an equal distance from one another, forming a perfect circle around the truck. Even stranger, they appeared to be using subtle body language to communicate. A smaller bear gave a slight shake of its head, and immediately, two others adjusted their positions, as if following orders. What is this? I whispered aloud, my heart pounding. In over 15 years of observing wildlife, I had never seen anything like this. Bears were solitary creatures. They didn't gather in groups, let alone coordinate their movements like this. I tried starting the truck again, turning the key once, a dry, lifeless click, a second time, a third. Nothing but silence. The truck was as useless as a dead weight. Damn it! I yelled, slamming my fist against the steering wheel in frustration. In desperation, I pressed the truck's horn. The sharp blare shattered the stillness of the night. Instead of retreating, the bears all turned their heads toward me in unison, their eyes glowing faintly under the weak remnants of the headlights. In that moment, I could swear I heard each of their breaths, heavy and deliberate. One bear, the largest, took 2 deliberate steps toward the truck. Its fur bristled in the dim light, and I could see the powerful muscles shifting beneath its thick coat. I instinctively leaned back, feeling as though it could flip the truck over effortlessly if it wanted to. Struggling to stay calm, I grabbed my camera and snapped a few shots through the windshield. These photos might be the only evidence of what was happening, if I survived the night. Through the lens, I saw the largest bear rear up on its hind legs, towering so high it nearly obscured my entire view. It took a deep breath, its exhale forming clouds in the cold air, and then it let out a low, short growl. Immediately, the other bears responded. Some shifted their positions, adjusting their spacing as if following orders. It felt like I was witnessing a meticulously choreographed military drill, only it was being conducted by the most massive and dangerous creatures I had ever seen. I sat frozen, afraid to move, desperately trying to think of a way out. A thought flashed through my mind. The flare gun. I opened the glove compartment, finding the small flare gun and a few cartridges. But I hesitated. If I fired a flare, would it scare them off or enrage them? My hands trembled, cold sweat dripping down my forehead. Outside, the bears continued their movements, their circle tightening further around the truck. A sudden noise to my right made me jump. A smaller bear had moved closer to the vehicle. It was then I realized the bears weren't just watching. They were waiting for something. I remained motionless in my seat, painfully aware that any wrong move could lead to dire consequences. But what terrified me more than anything was the unmistakable feeling that these weren't ordinary wild animals. They were far smarter, intelligent to a degree that was deeply unsettling. I remained seated in the truck, unease gripping me as I stared at the bears outside. A cold chill filled the air, but sweat trickled down my forehead. The circle of bears grew tighter, yet they showed no aggression. Instead, they seemed to be studying me intently. One thought kept repeating in my mind, this isn't normal. Suddenly, a burnt smell crept into the air. I sniffed, wondering if I was imagining it. But no, the scent of smoke became stronger with each passing second. Glancing out the window, I noticed an orange glow flickering on the horizon. Smoke? I murmured, trying to peer further through the mist. My heart raced as I realized it wasn't just smoke, it was the glow of an approaching wildfire. I cracked the window slightly to listen, and the distant crackling of burning branches carried on the wind. The bears all turned their heads toward the glow simultaneously. Their ears perked up, and they sniffed the air, sensing the danger long before I had. They began moving with more urgency, and for the first time it hit me. They weren't simply encircling me. They had a different purpose. The wind picked up, carrying waves of heat that seeped through the truck's door. I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. The fire was spreading fast, and if I didn't leave soon, I'd be trapped in the flames. A low growl from the largest bear startled me. It stepped closer, now less than 10 meters from the truck. Rising on its hind legs, it faced the orange glow in the distance before suddenly turning its head to look directly at me. Through the glass, I could feel the urgency in its gaze. "What is this?" I whispered, unable to believe what was happening. Then, the massive bear lowered itself and pointed its snout toward a narrow path between the trees to the right of the truck. Its gesture was unmistakable. My mind raced as the realization hit me. It's showing me the way. I had no time to think further. The flames were closing in, and the heat was becoming unbearable. A burning branch crashed down not far from the truck, scattering brilliant sparks across the ground. I tried starting the engine one last time, praying desperately. The engine only clicked uselessly. "Come on, please!" I yelled, slamming my hands on the steering wheel as if frustration could bring the vehicle to life. Outside, the bears were moving, but they weren't leaving. Instead, they were reshaping their circle, no longer encircling me, but forming what looked like a protective barrier. I could sense the shift. They weren't my enemies. They were trying to help me. The realization sent chills down my spine, but also gave me a glimmer of hope. A thunderous crash from behind made me turn my head. A massive pine tree, its crown ablaze, toppled to the ground just meters away from the truck. I screamed, clutching the steering wheel as my heart pounded wildly. The fire from the fallen tree began spreading across the dry grass. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Grabbing the flare gun from the glove compartment, I loaded a cartridge and fired it into the sky. The bright red light illuminated the entire area, giving me a clearer view of the situation. In the glow of the flare, I saw that the bears weren't fleeing. They stood firm, their eyes fixed on the advancing flames, as if calculating their next move. The largest bear let out another deep growl, and the others began to move. But they didn't run into the forest. They moved around the truck, clearing a path that led toward the narrow trail the big bear had pointed to earlier. The flare's light was fading, but in that brief moment, I understood. They were creating a safe corridor, guiding me to safety. All right, I mumbled, deciding to stop doubting them. I grabbed my emergency bag and prepared to leave the truck. But as soon as I opened the door, a thick cloud of smoke rushed in, making me cough violently. The strong wind was spreading the flames faster than I had anticipated, and I knew I didn't have much time. Looking toward the bears, I saw them standing resolutely, as if waiting for me. "We don't have another option, Emma," I told myself, gripping the bag tightly. Once more, I felt the undeniable pull of the big bear's gaze. This wasn't a normal wild animal. It had a purpose here, and I decided to trust it. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the truck and onto the path it had shown me. I stepped out of the truck, the biting cold quickly replaced by the suffocating heat radiating from the encroaching flames. Smoke billowed upward, making the air thick and hard to breathe. My hand gripped the flare gun tightly as I walked cautiously across the dry grass and rocky ground. Every sense was heightened as I looked at the bears standing still, their eyes seeming to urge, "Follow us." The largest bear, I had begun to think of it as the leader, moved forward with deliberate steps. The other bears fell into formation behind it, creating a passageway toward the narrow path it had pointed out earlier. I kept a safe distance, not too far but not too close either. Every step was measured, my mind racing with uncertainty about what lay ahead. The fire spread faster than I had imagined. The crackling of burning trees and the snapping of branches were like a death knell echoing through the forest. I glanced back to see embers glowing orange and red, swirling in the smoky air. Occasionally, A strong gust of wind carried the acrid smell of burning wood and waves of searing heat that stung my skin. Yet the bears moved steadily, their calm, purposeful manner almost reassuring. "They know the way," I muttered, as much to convince myself as to state the obvious. Through the thick haze of smoke, the leader guided me to a small stream. The water rushed quickly, but was shallow enough for me to cross without being swept away. As I stepped into the cool water, a loud crack startled me. A burning branch crashed down ahead, blocking the path with flames that spread rapidly along its dry surface. My heart pounded as I watched the fire race across the branch, creating an impassable barrier. The leader paused, lifting its head to survey the obstruction. Then it let out a deep, short growl. Almost immediately, two other bears rushed forward, using their massive shoulders and claws to push the burning branch aside. Each shove sent glowing embers flying, forcing me to turn my face away from the intense heat. Within minutes, the path was cleared again. The leader glanced back at me, as if to ensure I was still following, then continued forward. I quickened my pace, knowing every second counted. Around me, other animals began to appear, fleeing through the smoke-filled forest. A small deer darted past, its wide eyes filled with fear. Soon after, I caught sight of several foxes, their agile forms weaving through the dense haze. A pack of wolves ran silently alongside the bears, showing no signs of hostility. The presence of so many animals made me realize something profound. This wasn't just my escape, it was a mass exodus, a collective effort for survival by the entire forest. A loud explosion echoed from the distance. I turned around to see a massive ancient tree crashing to the ground, its fiery branches igniting the area we had just passed. The flames roared higher, illuminating a section of the forest with an ominous glow. I swallowed hard, realizing the fire was advancing much faster than I had anticipated. Yet the bears pressed on, undeterred. The leader forged ahead with unshakable resolve, its enormous paws steady on the increasingly heated ground. We reached an area filled with large boulders, where the terrain became more treacherous. The smaller bears moved ahead, almost as if scouting the path to ensure it was safe. I struggled to follow, slipping on the slick rocks and grabbing onto a nearby tree trunk for balance. At that moment, the leader turned back, its gaze locking onto mine. It stood still for a moment, then stepped closer, its presence calm and reassuring. In that instant, I felt as though it was telling me, "Keep going. We won't leave you behind." Drawing a deep breath, I pushed forward. The other bears moved purposefully around me, forming a protective formation. When the sound of snapping branches came from nearby, two larger bears immediately sprinted toward the noise, positioning themselves between me and the potential danger. It was clear they weren't just guiding me, they were ready to confront any threat to protect me. Time passed, and the heat grew unbearable. My head spun, sweat poured down my face, and each breath was a struggle against the choking smoke. But whenever I looked at the leader, still moving forward with unwavering determination, I knew I couldn't stop. I had to trust them. There was no other choice. At last, we reached a narrow trail leading out of the forest. I saw light breaking through an open clearing ahead, a beacon of safety. Relief washed over me, but the fire was dangerously close now, the heat almost unbearable. Turning back, I saw the bear still standing there, watching me. The leader let out a powerful roar, a command that seemed to say, "Run!" I didn't hesitate. I ran as fast as I could, leaving behind the sound of crackling flames, the leader's growls, and the chaos of an entire forest in turmoil. I didn't know what would happen to them, but I knew that these bears had done everything in their power to lead me and countless other creatures to safety. They had become silent heroes in this battle against nature's fury. The light ahead grew brighter. Though the smoke was still thick, I could see two beams piercing through the darkness. Headlights from the ranger station. It was a sign of life, a sanctuary amidst the inferno consuming the forest. My heart pounded, and my legs moved faster despite my body's exhaustion. As I got closer, the light from the station illuminated a clearing in front of me. I turned back, glancing over my shoulder. The bears were still there, standing several dozen meters away. The leader was at the center, its eyes glowing in the fiery light. Behind it, the other bears remained in formation, unmoving. In that moment, I realized they were waiting, waiting until I and the other creatures were completely safe. A noise from the ranger station startled me. A group of rescue workers ran out, flashlights and megaphones in hand. One of them shouted, "Are you okay? Is anyone else out there?" I raised my hand and yelled back, my voice hoarse from the smoke. "I'm okay, but you need to see this." As they approached, I pointed toward the bears. Their eyes widened, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief. "No way," one of them murmured. "Grizzlies, and a whole pack this size?" They quickly pulled me into the safety of their perimeter, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the bears. The leader took another step forward, as if to ensure I had made it to safety. I could see patches of singed fur on its massive body, a testament to how close it had been to the flames. It took a deep breath, the exhale forming a puff of white mist before turning its head back toward the forest. The entire group of bears began to move, but they didn't leave immediately. They stood their ground, as if checking to see if any other creatures needed saving. I watched in awe as deer, foxes, wolves, and even a moose emerged one by one, running through the safe corridor the bears had created. All of them headed toward the light of the ranger station. It was a vibrant, living stream of life. A mass exodus I could never have imagined witnessing. A rescue worker looked at me, his voice filled with astonishment. "What did you do to keep them from attacking you?" I shook my head, still unable to fully process what I had just experienced. "I didn't do anything. They saved me." Everyone around me fell silent. No one said another word as the light from the ranger station illuminated the silhouettes of the bears standing amidst the smoke and fire. One smaller bear, perhaps one of the youngest of the group, turned back to look at me before leaving. It blinked, just a simple gesture, but one that made my chest tighten. Finally, the leader let out a deep growl. It wasn't a threatening sound, but more like a declaration. The mission was complete. The entire pack of bears turned and began walking back into the forest, each one moving slowly, deliberately. I stood there, watching until their shapes disappeared completely into the night, leaving me with an overwhelming sense of gratitude and reverence. A rescue worker gently touched my shoulder. "You need to get checked out. We have to report this." I nodded, but turned back one last time to the spot where the bears had vanished. A strange feeling welled up inside me, as if I had just witnessed something far beyond human understanding. Once inside, I sat down, clutching my camera tightly. The photos I had taken would tell a story no one could have anticipated. A story about bears that not only cooperated, but also risked their lives to protect others, not just their own kind, but all creatures. This wasn't just a tale of survival. It was a testament to the compassion within the natural world, a compassion that humanity is only beginning to understand. In the days following my escape from the wildfire, I couldn't shake the image of the bear pack from my mind. The story I told the rescue workers at the ranger station quickly spread. Their initial reactions were a mix of amazement and skepticism, until I showed them the photos and videos I had captured. Those images needed no explanation. They spoke for themselves. Wildlife biologists and conservationists flocked to the ranger station as soon as the story went public. They watched my footage repeatedly, analyzing every detail: the bears' organized movements, their protective actions toward me and other creatures, and the unmistakable leadership displayed by the bear I called the leader. "This isn't just unusual," one wildlife researcher told me, his voice still tinged with disbelief. "This is revolutionary in how we understand animal behavior. Grizzly bears have never been known to exhibit anything like this." My story quickly became the center of scientific discussions. Major publications, from the New York Times to National Geographic, reached out, requesting permission to feature my images and videos. The footage went viral on social media, garnering millions of views. One photograph in particular, a shot of the leader standing in front of my truck amid the smoke and flames, became a symbol of resilience and the compassion of the natural world. But to me, this wasn't just a media or scientific event. It fundamentally changed how I viewed nature. I had always believed I understood wildlife, that I was merely an observer documenting their lives. This experience made me realize there is so much we don't know, things that transcend our current scientific understanding. In the following days, as I stayed in the area to support the researchers, we began to notice more extraordinary behaviors from the bears. Instead of leaving, they remained in the burned region, almost as if they were guarding it. They guided smaller, weaker animals to safer areas where food and water were available. I saw them sharing their territory, a rarity among grizzlies, especially with the approach of winter. It became clear that these bears were not just acting on instinct. Their actions were deliberate, purposeful, and compassionate. They were caretakers of a devastated ecosystem, stepping into a role I never imagined possible for them. One day, I saw the leader return to the area near the ranger station. This time, it wasn't alone. It was guiding a herd of hesitant deer, unsure of where to go. The leader paused, scanning the surroundings as if ensuring everything was safe before continuing to lead them. Watching this through the lens of my camera, I felt as though I was witnessing something sacred, something beyond words. This story didn't just shift the perspectives of scientists, it resonated deeply with the public. Conservation organizations began advocating for the protection of the area and proposed long-term research programs to better understand the bear's behavior. Some policymakers even suggested legislation to halt logging activities in the region and turn it into a protected natural reserve. I received countless invitations for interviews, book deals, and appearances on television programs. Eventually, I decided to tell my story in a book titled The Silent Heroes of the Green Forest. In it, I shared not only my personal experiences, but also emphasized the urgency of protecting nature. We are not the masters of Earth, I wrote. We are merely a part of it, and sometimes the creatures we consider lesser have the power to save us. My life changed completely after that event. I was no longer just a wildlife photographer. I became a storyteller for nature, a bridge between humanity and the natural world we so often take for granted. What moved me most, however, was when I returned to the forest several months after the fire. The landscape was transformed. Ancient trees reduced to charred remnants, the forest floor blanketed in ash. But amidst the devastation, I witnessed something extraordinary. The bear pack was still there, gathered near the ranger station. They hadn't left. They continued to guard the forest as it slowly began to heal, as if they understood that this place needed their care. The leader stood at the center of the pack, its fur now marked with scars from the fire, burns that would never fade. When I raised my camera, it looked straight at me, its gaze as resolute and intelligent as the first time we met. In that moment, I no longer felt like a photographer, an observer, or even someone they had saved. I felt like a small part of a much larger story, a story of compassion, resilience, and the profound connection between all living beings on this planet. I lowered my camera, standing silently as the bears disappeared into the shadows of the regrowing trees. Though I didn't know what the future held for them, I was certain of one thing: they had changed me forever. And to me, that was a gift beyond measure.